Sakshi from Rohini College of Engineering and Technology. Today we are going to see the topic Extensible Authentication Protocol, that is EAP in network security. So EAP is defined in the standard RFC 3748 and it provides the transport service for the exchange of authentication information between the client system and the authentication server. So what is the role of EAP? It is a protocol which is used to support the message exchanges between the client and the authentication server. So the service can be extended by using specific authentication protocol, and it should be installed both at the client side and at the authentication server. So commonly supported EAP methods are transport layer security, tunneled TLS, generalized pre-shared secret key, and internet key exchange version 2. So this is the EAP layered context. So we have the EAP supports many of the data link layer methods, and we have the EAP layer, and it can support any authentication method as I told, like TLS, TTLS, that is tunneled TLS, internet key exchange version 2, etc. So what is EAP? So the main thing of EAP is it won't depend on IP connectivity. Okay, so that is the main thing of EAP. Since EAP does not require IP connectivity, it provides the support for reliable transport of authentication protocols. It was designed for use in network access authentication, where the IP layer connectivity may not be available. Okay, so it can be used for bulk data transport. So, but it is not recommended always because it is not depending on the IP layer connectivity. So, EAP, it is mainly designed for the network access authentication, where we cannot have IP layer connectivity. Because of that, we cannot recommend EAP for bulk data transport. So EAP layering, as I told, we have three layers: data link layer, EAP layer, and authentication methods. So as I already told, EAP is extensible. That is, you can include various types of authentication methods between the client and the authentication server. It can operate over a variety of network and the link level facilities. It includes point-to-point, LAN, and other networks. So what is pass-through authenticator? So when EAP is operating as a pass-through authenticator, an authenticator performs checks on the code. It checks the identifier and it checks the length fields. So what is EAP is doing means it forwards the EAP packets received from the peer to the authentication layer to the backend authentication server. Similarly, packets received from backend authentication server to the peer, they are forwarded. It acts as an intermediate. So that's why it's called as pass-through authenticator. So when it is acting as a pass-through authenticator, an authenticator performs the checks on the code, identifier, and length fields. What it is doing means it just forwards the EAP packets between the client and the authentication server. So this is EAP protocol exchanges. So we have three components: EAP peer, EAP authenticator, and authentication server. Sometimes we may perform by using only two components, EAP peer and EAP authentication also. At the lower layer, we can use 802.1x protocol or point-to-point protocol. So this is EAP message flow in pass-through mode. As I told, here we have three components and it acts as an intermediate component. Okay, so initially the message is initiated by sending a EAP request, and it is requesting for the identity of the peer. So the identity of the peer is shared to the authenticator, and from the authenticator it is forwarded to authentication server. This is called pass-through mode. client to authenticator, then authenticator to server. Okay, so what is authenticator server is doing means it checks the authentication and it sends the method as authentication, and it sends a request to the peer through the authenticator. So if the method is agreed by the peer, it immediately sends the response with the method authentication. So if the peer is not agreeing with the method, it may send a negative acknowledgement. So in that case, the authentication server can choose either any one of the method. One is EAP method, or otherwise it can abort the operation. Okay, so in EAP method, it again and again sends the request method, and it gets the response method after the sufficient times of exchanges. So it may indicate the success or failure of the authentication. So thank you. So that's about EAP. So once again, so what is EAP? We have studied the definition. It is one protocol which is mainly used for exchanging the messages regarding authentication between the client and authentication server, and it can support variety of EAP methods, and it is used in application where IP layer connectivity is not available. And we have three layers: data link layer, EAP layer, and it can support authentication methods. It may act as a pass-through authenticator, that is the intermediate person between the peer and the server. And we have studied several exchanges also. So in several exchanges in pass-through mode, the authentication server sends the request. If the peer is agreed with that, it sends immediate response and the authentication is success. If the peer is not agreed, authentication server may choose with two different action. Either it may continue the EAP transaction or it may abort the transaction. So if it chooses with EAP, it has to send the request and it has to obtain the response from the peer for several times. After some predetermined times, the EAP success or failure is indicated by authentication server. So thank you.